In the Washington Post, it's reporting it right now that the United Arab Emirates arranged a secret meeting in January between a Russian close to Vladimir Putin and a key Trump supporter, Blackwater founder Eric Prince. Now, Prince had no formal role in the Trump transition, but his sister is Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. Prince himself, a major Trump donor. He visited Trump transition offices back in December. Greg Miller from the Washington Post, one of the journalists who broke this story, joins us. Greg?
Yes.
Tell me, where was this meeting and why was this meeting?
So this meeting happened in the Seychelles, this set of islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean in January, just weeks before Trump's inauguration. And our understanding of it is that it was arranged with the help of the United Arab Emirates as a sort of back-channel communication between the Trump team and Russia. So Eric Prince has deep contacts with the Trump White House, and it met with a wealthy Russian individual with close ties to Putin, and the agenda is not completely clear, but one of the things we're told they discussed was trying to find ways to drive a wedge between Russia and Iran.
All right. Why did it have to be a back-channel meeting? Because we're also learning, where we know that during that time, is that General Flynn, who had then been named as National Security Advisor, he had contacts with the Russian ambassador. So why did Eric Prince have to do this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. It does come at a time when the Trump transition team's contacts with Russia are under a great deal of scrutiny. So the FBI is already looking at General Flynn's contacts with the Russian ambassador. There was a meeting at Trump Tower with the Russian ambassador in early December, and then a subsequent meeting with the Crown Prince of the UAE, and that appears to have helped set in motion this meeting in the Seychelles. But you're right. I mean, for all of these sort of contacts between the Russian figures and Trump associates that kind of happen not exactly in plain view, but here in the United States at least, the trouble that they went to try to set something up in this remote part of the Indian Ocean just seems really odd.
Well, it's particularly odd because it is normal or conventional for a transition team to want to have contact with, other nations, Russia included. Jeremy Bash, who's been on our air, as one of our contributors, said that many times. He worked at the CIA and the Department of Defense. But what's peculiar about this is that it seems to be outsourced to someone who has been controversial in the past with Blackwater. And, that's what's so peculiar, is that why not send Jared Kushner to have a conversation with him, or someone on the transition team, or General Flynn? Why Eric Prince?
Well, I mean, Prince is positioned, has close relationships with the UAE, so when they agree to broker this meeting, and this is all arranged by the UAE, Eric Prince has made, his firms have made hundreds of millions of dollars from UAE. He was even based there for a time. He would be a logical person for them to go to. Hey, we have a Russian...
If they didn't have the contact themselves, I mean, that's the peculiar, that's the point that's so different. They could have done this themselves, a transition team. Flynn could have. And was talking to them.
There are other aspects of this story that are sort of strange as well. Why does the Crown Prince of the UAE sort of make this weird secret flight into New York to meet with the Trump team, doesn't report it to the Obama administration? They learn about it only because they see that his name shows up on a flight manifest from Customs and Border Protection. So there's weird, there's a lot of weird effort to hide a lot of these meetings. Even those meetings that you're discussing, that you're referencing, that happened in New York. I mean, those are meetings that this Trump administration did not acknowledge or publicly identify until they were all revealed by news organizations, including the Post.
Well, I'm certain that the Washington Post and you will dig deeper into this one and to find out, why, what's really going on, because it does seem a little bit weird, some aspects of it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And brace yourself for this one, because we are on the verge of a big-time Washington, D.C. throwdown. It's over President Trump's Supreme Court pick and a move that could change forever the rules of the U.S. Senate. Today, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted along party lines to send Judge Neil Gorsuch's nomination to the Senate floor for a full Senate vote. But Democrats are up in arms. They do not want Judge Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, saying the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals judge refused to answer many of their questions. So Democrats are now ready to filibuster.
I will not support Judge Gorsuch's nomination in the Judiciary Committee today.
In light of Judge Gorsuch's record, I oppose his nomination.
Approval of Supreme Court justices must be by more than a razor-thin majority.
But credentials are not enough, not for the Supreme Court.
My conscience will not allow me to ratify the majority leader's actions.
I cannot support this nomination.
After the hearing, Republicans came to the podium slamming Democrats are playing politics, and the Republicans also vowing to invoke the nuclear option, meaning all they would need to put Judge Gorsuch on the Supreme Court is a simple majority, that's 51 votes, instead of the current 60-vote threshold.
If you're filibustering him as a Democrat, that just means you don't accept the fact that President Trump won.
Some of our colleagues are determined to just pound the table in order to stop Judge Gorsuch. And all they can come up with are facts that have absolutely nothing to do with his qualifications as a jurist.
We saw Democratic senators throw every fastball they could, use every attack they could, and end up with no meaningful criticism of Judge Gorsuch's record.
Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from the great state of Iowa and the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, joins us. Nice to see you, Senator.
Thank you, Greta. Glad to be with you.
Senator, is the Democrats' effort to filibuster Judge Gorsuch, is it about ideology or is it payback for Merrick Garland?
Well, from the speeches that they gave in our committee today, both of those excuses were given. But remember, all these excuses you heard today is because they can't lay a glove on this candidate, this nominee, because he's so outstandingly well qualified. He has expressed the independence that we expect of our judges, and just altogether 10 years of extreme qualifications serving on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. They can't do anything else except find those excuses.
All right, if you have the nuclear option, that will change everything in the U.S. Senate forever. And I know many senators, Republican, Democrats, are very distressed by the fact that this will change everything. Have you had any private conversations with either the ranking member, Senator Feinstein, or Senator Schumer, the minority leader, about this nuclear option, the fact that it's going to change everything in the Senate?
I have not, but let me make very clear, it's only going to change everything in the Senate forever for one position in our Constitution, and that's on the Supreme Court. Everything else that had 60-vote requirement up until November of 2013, the Democrats under Reid changed everything forever for every cabinet position and every judge. The only thing they left was the Supreme Court. So the big change came 4 years ago.
All right. I assume that the next Supreme Court justice could be a liberal. Right now, Judge Gorsuch is likely to replace a conservative, Justice Scalia. So it's conservative for conservative. So we're not going to see a dramatic change in the court, likely. The next one could be a liberal, which would be a big fight. Do you foresee that? Give me an idea of what you think is going to happen next time around when we have a President Trump conservative nominee for maybe a liberal opening on the court.
Well, I think that's at the time when the Democrats are going to realize that making 60-vote threshold to get this guy on the Supreme Court was a mistake, because if we change it the same way Reid changed it for everybody else 4 years ago, then they won't have anything to stand on to prevent the change that you just questioned me about.
Senator, let me move to another part of the Judiciary Committee of Oversight over the FBI. What are your thoughts on the FBI investigation? And you've got Chairman Nunes over in the House. I know the Senate, we've seen a bipartisan discussion in the Senate Intel Committee, but what do you make of what's going on in the House Intel Committee?
Well, what goes on in the House I shouldn't comment on, but I believe that if somebody has some information that shows that laws were violated and people's names unmasked so that they are accused of being something they probably didn't do, and it was done for political purposes, I think that anything that makes transparency in things that are wrong in government brings about greater accountability in government, and whoever did that needs to be held responsible. There's too much, there's plenty of legitimate concern about Russia interfering in our elections. I don't have any problem with that, but there hasn't been enough concern about the people that have been leaking and committing a felony in the leaking of it.
Does that suggest that, as oversight for the FBI, if you suspect that there's been some unmasking unlawfully, that you would quickly refer to the Justice Department for an investigation into the person who did the unmasking?
I've got 2 letters to the Justice Department right now involving some things that are related to Russia, the dossier that was used against Republican and against Clinton by this guy named Steele. I've got questions into the FBI about McCabe, the deputy director, who seems to have ties to Governor McAuliffe, and finding out whether or not there's any conflict of interest there, both in regard, as the Inspector General is looking at it, in regard to the Clinton emails, but what does this McCabe have to do with the investigation of the dossier and the FBI paying for some information that is simply looks like opposition research? Is there a conflict of interest there? That's what I have to worry about right now, because there's plenty of investigation on the Russian influence under the intelligence committees.
All right, one quick question. If you were a betting man, what's more likely to happen this year? Health care, a repeal of Obamacare and some replacement, or tax reform?
Oh, they're both going to happen this year. Number one, tax reform, because it can be done in a better way that Republicans are united. And 2, because of the death spiral of Obamacare, we've got to do something to save health care for the American people, because they aren't going to get it within a year or 2 under Obamacare.
Senator, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much. Glad to be with you.
Okay, I have something to say for the record, and it's actually a bit of a public service announcement. It's ahead of the impending showdown in the U.S. Senate. I have been misled, and as a consequence, you got misled. Now, don't get all revved up saying fake news and firing off those tweets on me. No one died. But I will tell you what happened. It's about President Trump's Supreme Court nominee. Here's how I first said his name. It looked and sounded correct to me. The 2 candidates, at least we think they are, Gorsuch and Hardiman, Neil Gorsuch, Judge Neil Gorsuch. Judge Gorsuch, well, as days marched on, someone told me I was wrong, that I should pronounce it like this. President Trump's Supreme Court picked Judge Neil Gorsuch. Judge Gorsuch. Judge Neil Gorsuch. Judge Gorsuch. Okay, Gorsuch, Gorsuch, whatever. But one thing is absolutely clear, I am not the only one.
I want you to meet Judge Neil Gorsuch.
The president announced his pick for the Supreme Court, Judge Gorsuch.
No one could have chosen better than Neil Gorsuch.
I had a good meeting with nominee Gorsuch.
All right, so what is it? Well, during day 2 of the confirmation hearing, Senator Tom Tillis confused himself, decided to get to the bottom of it all once and for all.
Please pronounce your last name.
I've answered to a lot of things, Senator. Gorsuch is how I say it, but
the reason I asked that question is we had probably 4 or 5 cheat sheets up here with different phonetic, so that is Gorsuch, right?
That's how I'd say
it. It's Gorsuch. For everybody in the audience, it's Gorsuch.
Yes, Gorsuch, and now I have my own cheat sheet right here, Gorsuch. And by the way, what is with that E at the end of Van Susteren? Got me. Sometimes I don't even pronounce it. And sometimes, well, I just sort of slur right over it. I'm not paying attention to that E. Moments ago, NBC's Kristen Welker speaking to President Trump in the Oval Office. And the big news, the president saying he is serious about health care reform and calling reports that he has given up on it false. The president saying he is talking to moderate and conservative Republicans, but that he is not reaching out to Democrats at this time, saying he believes they are not likely to work with them right now. With me, former Vermont governor and former chair of the Democratic National Committee, Howard Dean. Good evening, Governor.
Thanks for having me on.
I sort of had the thought, before I heard what the president said to Kristen Welker tonight, that the president was likely to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats on health care, be seen that it was sort of a no hope among his own party because it's so disparate in the House.
Well, every day is a different day for the president. You never know what he's going to say next, so who knows what he's going to do. I think it's unlikely health care comes back, and the reason I think it's unlikely is, it's not going to pass the Senate because there are too many senators who are up who have huge Medicaid populations. They're going to lose their health insurance. So if you were a member of the House, why would you walk the plank for a president with a 37% favorability rating when you knew the bill was going to get killed in the Senate? And you could think of all those ads. He voted to take away your health care. I don't see it coming back.
Every time he reaches over and picks off someone who is in the Freedom Caucus, he loses the moderate Republicans, and he loses the Senate vote. At that point.
And at 38%, he doesn't have a lot of leverage to scare people. I mean, he tried that with the Freedom Caucus, and they basically flipped the bird.
So what could he do for the Democrats? Do you think that would be sort of, where could they both sort of reach out to each other? At what point?
Honestly, at this point, I think the atmosphere is so poisonous in Washington, I don't think he can get anything done. I really don't. I mean, the things he's had to say, now Schumer is the consummate deal maker, and he and Schumer probably could come to some sort of a deal about something. But the fight every day that goes on is he's not respectful of others, and you pay a price for that.
Is everything fine in the Democratic view with Obamacare in the sense that if nothing is done, it won't collapse? I mean, you hear the Republicans saying it's going to collapse and all these things are going to happen. What if nothing is done, what is going to happen for everybody?
Well, the insurance costs will go up and insurers will leave markets, and that's a problem. That's why the public option was...
Problem or catastrophic?
It's not catastrophic. I mean, that happens all over the place. It's not, there are bigger parts of this country where the insurance premiums are going down than they are up. This program, it's actually a little like it's the flip side of what happened with Part D of Medicare, which the Republicans pushed through against the Democrats, and it actually came in under budget. Obamacare is substantially under budget. It's actually cost much less than the CBO said it was going to cost when it was enacted.
Okay, so the people, the premiums go down, great, good for them, and that's good news. What about in Arizona, where you hear that the rates have gone up like 116% or some phenomenon?
Right. Well,
why is that?
I can't tell you about Arizona because I don't know the insurance market, but they probably have an insurance commissioner that's not tough enough with the insurance committee. I mean, you don't have to let the insurance companies do that. Now, eventually they leave the market. You have to have a substitute, and that's the weakness of the program. The substitute could have been Medicare for people who are under 65, but it wasn't. So there's a fix. I mean, we should have let people buy into the Medicare system. The individual mandate's not needed. The insurance companies love it. In theory, you need it, but the truth is most people do the smart thing. Most Americans are not going to go bare with no health insurance, including young people, and there's some fixes to that. So there's some fixes we could make to Obamacare without all this crazy rhetoric and this right-wing, non-policy of Paul Ryan's.
Wish list, you get to fix one thing in Obamacare, and you get to do it. What is it?
Public option.
But then that's getting rid of all the insurance companies. Then it's done.
No. Public option gives Americans the choice.
I mean, like Medicare. Medicare is essentially Medicare is essentially public option.
Medicare is the public option. You can buy Medicare, and if you want to stay in the private sector, you buy insurance policies. It keeps the insurance policies honest. If you'd rather keep an insurance company because you think the private sector is better, you get to do it. But it keeps them from raising their prices unfairly.
Do you think you and Senator Coburn, as Republican, could get in a room and
No,
work things out?
I
tried that.
Tom is the best, but he is really, really conservative.
But don't you think you could work it out, the two of you?
We could work a lot out, but he fundamentally has some different views that I do.
Well, you give it a shot.
Oh, yeah, he's a good guy. Absolutely.
Governor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And moments ago, NBC News catching up with President Trump in the Oval Office. With me, NBC's Kristen Welker from the White House, who just spoke with the president. Kristen.
It was extraordinary, Greta. President Trump spoke with me for a few moments from the Oval Office, and I had the chance to ask him about health care. The fact that, of course, his initial push for health care reform was defeated. And he said, look, he's still negotiating. He is still trying to get a deal. Of course, we know that he went golfing with Senator Rand Paul over the weekend. I asked him about that meeting. He said it went well. I asked him if they discussed specifics, and he said they did, in fact, discuss specifics. Wouldn't get into what those specifics were. But he said, look, this notion that he's not read in on the details is just silly. simply false. He said he's been read it on all of the little nitty-gritty details all along. And I tried to get him to characterize how serious this effort is to revive health care. He indicated he's very serious about it. And in fact, Hallie Jackson reporting that Vice President Mike Pence met with some House leaders as well, discussed the possibility of reviving health care reform, and came away from that meeting with a very positive sense that there is potentially something that they can get done. Met with some committee heads as well during that meeting. So there seems to be a real shift here and a sense that health care not necessarily dead. Of course, there's the reality, the fact that they also want to do tax reform, infrastructure potentially, but the president really trying to send a message that he's serious about reviving these talks on health care, Greta.
All right, Kristen, I mean, that's incredible that we're getting this insight into the president. But how did you happen to get into the Oval Office to talk to the president? I mean, that seems unusual.
I was speaking with one of his staffers, and I think that he sort of was aware of the fact that we were there, invited us in, clearly wanted to talk about health care, and I got to ask him a few questions. It was a very brief meeting, Greta, but nonetheless, this message that he does feel as though he can get something done. One other headline, I asked him if he felt as though he could work with Democrats, and he said he feels like right now it would be tough to work with Democrats because there's so much tension, raw emotion, particularly over Neil Gorsuch. So he seemed to indicate that his best chance for getting something done would be working with Republicans, going back to the Freedom Caucus, the Tuesday Group, the moderate and conservative groups that he was talking with before. He seemed to indicate that there was some room there for some progress, Greta.
Kristen, thank you. And that president certainly is accessible.